very lovely.
There you go. Yeah, I would request that everyone put their themselves on mute until such time you're going to ask a question. Otherwise, it does become too difficult for everyone to hear.
We are recording. We're good now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed.
Yep.
One of the early questions that Kim Gifford shared with me, many of you know Kim, she's a parent in the district, and she's been communicating with me and sharing some of the concerns she's been hearing. One of the initial questions was, is the district taking into account the needs of students with IEPs? And, you know, I can unequivocally say yes. You know, at the district level, we are, at each individual building, we've been as administrators frequently.
You need to force mute everyone.
Everyone needs to be on mute unless the speaker. That would help.
Whoever is the host, you can go through and you can see the mics on the participant list, and you can make sure they're all red with an X if you need to.
Yeah, I'm doing that
now. Right. Essentially, I was saying that, yes, students with IEPs and their needs are being taken into consideration. Really, the purpose of today's time for us together is to give you all opportunities to ask questions, offer suggestions, you know, provide feedback about aspects of you know, your wishes and your hopes for the coming school year, because we want to take that into consideration as we're planning. And I think I'm seeing now Dr. Hall is with us, our superintendent, so thank you for being here. Dr. Grauer from the high school is here. I can't see.
Ben, you just muted yourself.
Hello?
All right. So I've unmuted myself. So anyway, we're fortunate, as everyone can see, from the presence of Dr. Hall, Dr. Grauer, Vince Estrada, we have a solid collaborative team as we're planning for our return to school. Specifically,
We also have a board member, Miss Brandy here. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller, for being here. I think it may be most effective if folks who are interested in asking a question or making a comment enter that in the chat feature. And then I know Mr. Rich is helping monitor that chat feature, and he can help us call on folks so that we have an orderly meeting and can get to as many folks as possible. Okay, so I am seeing one question about from a high school parent who, and I should say, as we go through our time together, if we have very specific individual questions, we may need to connect offline in a one-on-one format, you know, just so that we are getting to the questions and thoughts that impact the most number of folks. Certainly before we leave, I can type my email address into the chat feature. It's ben.gleason@mrhschools.net. Certainly I'm willing to engage further in conversation, whether through email or phone, what have you, you know, so that everyone's concerns and wishes are addressed. So I'm here. One question is about a high school student who will be going to South Tech part day, also has an IEP. That is one of those instances where your son is still eligible for and will receive special ed services. We'll need to work together as a team to determine what that looks like. But just going to South Tech does not preclude a child from receiving their special ed services. But we would need to work together to make sure we have a solid plan and schedule so that special ed support is still in place. There's a question about will SD allow video chat this fall? Yes, that will be an option should we need to go to a remote learning environment. Let's see. Let's see. Here's a question or a comment from a family who's new to the district. Wondering what went well last semester that we would intend to continue. I think as much individual attention as we were able to give, what was helpful, especially at some of the upper grades, students were able to engage effectively when they were able to see their teacher, in real time, so that synchronous learning. Now, I should say that worked for some students. For others, it didn't work as well for particular students. And there have been requests for recorded videos, asynchronous options, if you will, so the student can watch that instructional lesson multiple times. So that may be something to consider as well. Let's see. There is a question about if parents elect to keep children home, will there be opportunities for one-on-one video lessons or services with our SSD teachers? That will depend some on what kind of online curriculum and instruction MRH provides. And then we would work to adapt to that. That being said, keeping your child home does not negate or nullify your child's eligibility for special ed services, that kind of thing. What we will need to do is figure out, once, a decision is made and shared with the community, we would need to determine what that specifically would look like. Here's a question. If we have to go virtual, how will the students receive minutes for speech therapy, occupational therapy, etc.? There would be opportunities for video lessons with speech language pathologists, occupational therapists. SSD is looking into what it would take to offer telepractice or telehealth as opposed to more distance learning options, if you will. Telepractice, telehealth are kind of a next level of service delivery. And part of the issues there are that there are national certifying bodies for speech language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, that have practice guidelines, ethical standards about how that's implemented. So we need to keep those in mind. And then at the state level, of course, there are regulations for some of those practice areas through the Missouri Board of Registration of the Healing Arts. And then, of course, there's the issue of making sure staff have the appropriate technology and training to implement the therapies in a virtual format. Okay. There's a question about children who have social emotional needs, social emotional goals in their IEPs. And the question is, how will you serve those needs while practicing social distancing? You know, it's a very good question. You know, education nature is social, it is interactive. Actually, this week, all week, I happened to be at an MRH provided training about Kagan structures, which are very much about supporting social interactions, supporting deeper thinking about content. So those Kagan structures may be something that can be used. And part of this training at this time in our nation and in our world is some of those structures are being adapted for the need to be in a distance learning format. I'm also investing you know, budgetary resources in a program called Everyday Speech, which features real videos, not that there's anything wrong with cartoon characters or those kinds of things, but real videos so that you know, students can see and hear video models of different social scenarios. So that's another way that we could potentially be working on social emotional goals while social distancing. So we have a question from a parent at ECC. The child's case manager left. So what I can tell you is that we are fully staffed. We were able to hire a great teacher, Ellie Murphy, who actually happens to be an MRH resident as well, so she understands the community. I think we'll be in very good hands. She's an experienced teacher with SSD. Dr. Hebenstreit feel very good about her coming on board. And then the question goes on that the child is due for an evaluation. We did, across the county, get behind on completing evaluations because of the closure. You know, the evaluations in almost all instances need to be done face-to-face with school psychologists, speech language pathologists, et cetera. So we will be working to catch up on evaluations that are due or overdue, you know, just as quickly as we can. Let's see here. One question is, will case managers be contacting families prior to the start? Yes, that should definitely happen. It's an expectation that I have for staff. Something we'll probably want to look at depending on what opportunities there may or may not be for, you know, teacher meet and greets, because that may have to change given the pandemic. To consider some Zoom meetings, new case managers and students, because I think we want to, foster a level of comfort and awareness on the side of our students, so that they feel good and they know a friendly face to look for, during those first few days of school. I think that's especially important with our youngest learners who, probably experience some anxiety just going back to school in a regular school year. All right. There's a question, a specific question about enrollment, and I will.
Hey, Ben, those 2 students are enrolled.
Okay, thank you. I
checked on
thought
that.
so. I think we had not gotten to the point of enrolling, unenrolling, or transferring.
Yeah, they're in. I saw them in there in first grade.
Thank you. Okay. What is the plan for assisting children with an IEP who are virtually learning but have parents who are working during distance learning hours? That's an excellent question. I would certainly have to teachers to see if they would, potentially have some flexibility in setting up some office hours outside of the standard school day. There are some contractual issues with the district that would come into play. But, certainly our goal is to, support students and acknowledge that families are in many different situations work-wise. And we do have students clearly who, need some significant support, especially if we're in a virtual learning environment, in order to meaningfully access their learning. Here's a question. Does special ed include services for gifted students or those in E4 programs? No, those are 2 separate programs, 2 different eligibility criteria. Special ed eligibility and services are provided through special school district staff, whereas gifted E4 is provided through MRH staff. Now, that being said, sometimes we work together because we have students who are eligible for both IEPs and gifted education. So if we have a student that's eligible for both, then of course we work together to try and create a unified support plan for those students. But they are technically separate programs. One question, if we go virtual, will you offer one-on-one online meetings? They may not be one-on-one, but we would certainly be looking to offer, those live online lessons with special ed teachers and other related service staff. Here's a question. Someone is not feeling comfortable with being in school due to the current virus numbers, but of course they want their child to receive services. And again, depending on, how MRH decides to provide distance learning for families who opt not to send their child at all. So that's one scenario. The other scenario, of course, would be if we start and we're in session and we have to close, then that would be more clear-cut in terms of, special ed teachers just continuing on with the learning in the online format via It's Learning, which is the MRH online learning platform, and then those virtual meetings. There's a question, does the district have multiple plans in place for the school year? I will take a shot at this, or if Dr. Hall or someone else wants to chime in, but you know, I can say that the district is planning for multiple levels and multiple scenarios at each building. You know, the administrative team, the district central office leadership, the Board of Education has all been involved and engaged in thinking about those different levels and what those levels would mean for instruction and how to keep kids safe, depending on essentially the state of the spread of the virus in our community.
And Ben, before you move forward, I would say to the group, Mr. Gleason did a good job of just trying to capture this because we have 33 messages here. So just to let you know that July 20th is the day for the release of the district plan. So the building plans will provide families with more detail. Like, for example, is my student enrolled? Like things of that nature. I'm curious about classroom level things that are happening. Building level administration will provide you that level of support that you need, but overall idea of how learning is going to happen, just a macro frame for everyone is coming out a week from today. And that includes the different approaches of how we're going to try and protect everyone, students and staff at this point in time. So that is forthcoming.
Thank you. We have some questions about students who were either just recently found eligible for special ed or who were in the process of being evaluated for special ed services. If your child was just found eligible, we will be seeking to hold the IEP meeting as soon as possible, most likely in a virtual format for everyone's safety. And if a child was in the process of being evaluated, we will be working with our school psychologists, James Schieffer, Kelsey Sumner, to try and accelerate testing that was in place so that we don't lose more time in terms of potential special ed services. Okay. Vince, this may be one for you. Someone is asking about their child who will be in 7th grade and had a 504 plan previously, and they're wondering how that would work for middle school.
Happy to take that one, Ben. You can catch your breath, get a drink of water. Hey, Ms. Gunlock. Hey, this is Vince Estrada. I'm the Director of Student Services for MRH. Thanks for letting me participate in this call. So first of all, to answer your question generically, yes, we will absolutely have an obligation to implement 504 plans as students transition from elementary to middle school. No change there. But if you would like to contact me directly, Ms. Gunlock, I would encourage so we can talk more specifically about your child. And I will throw my work email address in the chat room and my work cell. So please do call me so we can talk specifically about your student. But to answer that generically for 504 plans, we absolutely have the same ethical obligation to provide those services and supports.
We have a question about at the high school level, middle school and high school level, our speech language pathologist did accept another job within SSD. We have hired a replacement, Claire Reeves. Dr. Grauer, Mike Dietrich, myself, and others interviewed feel very good about Ms. Reeves. And so when she's on board, like other IEP meetings that were not able to be held because of the closure, we'll seek to get IEP meetings held as soon as possible. In the meantime, please know that services do not stop if the IEP is overdue because of the closure. We'll continue to provide services as outlined in the most current IEP, and we'll try to get those done as soon as possible. Knowing that at this point, staff are not back and working yet, that will be mid-August. Question about how will we make sure our students know what changes to expect? Can we do videos, photos, social stories, student visits? I can tell you that we in one of our administrator meetings a few weeks ago, we were talking about videos of what the new bus scenarios may look like. We talked about special ed staff members creating social stories to go along with you know, if there are changes in the bus expectations, or you know, if we change you know, how students enter and exit the building. You know, again, for safety reasons, we can put together social stories and share those with families. I'm not sure at this point about student visits before they return to school. That's something that we may need to look at and consider, you know, closer to the time based on, you know, current health guidance, et cetera. There are questions about concerns about children getting behind during the pandemic. I think that's a very fair and real question and concern. You know, if we need to think about you know, missed services, we can do that on an individual basis. Let's see. Let's see, would it be possible for us to do a mix of both in-person and distance learning for speech language, OT, et cetera? We'd need to think about that within the overall framework of what MRH's plans will be. So I don't have an answer for that just at this time. Okay, here's a family whose child is at early childhood and felt like the summer school online program was very effective due to one-on-one time. So I appreciate that feedback. So here's a question about virtual lessons or video lessons with parent permission. And I don't know if we'll have the same permission format for special ed this coming year, should we need it. But with parent permission, you know, video conference options would be there. And the reason for the permission, of course, is to respect the privacy of each student. Because we can't control who's seen that lesson in folks' homes. So we would ask for parent permission to participate in those sessions. When will we be notified whether school will be virtual and whether our student has been accepted into special ed or alternative learning program?
Hey, Ben, let me chime in on that one just real quickly. So,
yes.
So Gabrielle, I saw that was your question. Why don't you, if you can get a hold of me on my cell phone or email, I can help you with that question specifically, okay?
Here's a question about speech language minutes. This child's speech language minutes are in a group working on social skills. Will there be opportunities for group meetings either virtually or in person with distancing and masks? Yeah, if we're in session, we are looking at in-person services. We are making plans at each building, space-wise, in terms of what kinds of spaces would accommodate special ed groups. So I've been working, with Dr. Hebenstreit, Dr. Thompson, our new principal at the elementary school, and the secondary principals as well. We are actually quite fortunate to have such a great collaborative working relationship. Honestly, the principals at ECC and elementary, in a number of instances, have rearranged how other spaces are being used. So our special ed staff are actually going to have some larger spaces than we've had the past few years. And that will certainly support in-person service provision, at a distance. Here's a question around teacher assistants or paraprofessionals, and wondering how that might translate virtually. If we're in a virtual environment, it's likely that paras would be included on those video conference calls. There is some limit to what they could do because they are not certified teachers or therapists. But we certainly want to include them as much as possible because many of our students who have that adult support have a wonderful relationship with their TAs and want that relationship to continue and to be not only an academic but a social emotional support as well. And honestly, I would welcome any thoughts on how that that might be done. Okay. So there is a question about services happening only during the school day. In general, yes, we would have to, for the most part, provide services during, teachers' standard work days. Here is, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my spot.
That's a Spanish. I think it's a Spanish question.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll field that. No problem. I'll call Julieta. Hola, Julieta. Yo te puedo llamar más temprano. I'll call her parent. It's a question about transportation.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
But real quickly, Benson, just to help you catch your breath and fill in a little bit. When the district is announcing its kind of macro plans on the 20th, we will begin addressing the school transportation issue. That's been a part of our planning about how to do that. So the reason why there's no bus information out yet is we're just trying to figure out how to kind of manage that process with social distancing, et cetera. So that could impact, obviously it will impact our bus routes and number of runs. So that's something we've been factoring in. So we haven't obviously released any bus routes or schedules yet. That'll be in the devil's in the details portion. After we announce on the 20th, we'll be digging into those level of details after that time. But we've been thinking a lot about how to do that in the most effective way. What I can tell you is that we're blessed by being relatively small and the bus runs are short. So we might be able to be creative on multiple runs and certainly relatively safe runs because the kids are not typically on the bus all that long. So we're working through those details. Just as a general statement about buses, since there was a question about it. So.
I've seen a couple questions about concern about regression and loss of skills and how we'll address that. Certainly the first thing we need to do, going on the assumption that we'll be back in session, and that's our hope, is that special ed staff will need to assess students to find out where they're currently performing, and then set about developing lessons to, either reteach skills that have been lost, and then move kids forward from there. But we do, it's a concern of ours, I think of all educators, the potential for learning loss over, the extended break. Let's see. Wondering if live sessions could be recorded. That is a possibility. We will have to, work on that. I know there is some technology that supports that, so that may be an option.
Hey, Ben, did you get that question about distance learning?
Maybe I
Mr. Bell?
did.
Well, I can speak on that just to give you another break.
Yeah,
So
I can't see it.
That's okay. So the distance learning will be something that we'll flesh out both in our July 20th plans and our more specific district building plans. The two pathways for that will be the distance learning option that we're able to offer families and still be enrolled so they can receive the full breadth of MRH SSD services. For families that decide to homeschool and chart their own path, and we're very supportive in those partnerships, you're still eligible for special education services through SNAP. But we have to, those details are still in the process of being fleshed out and working with platforms that give families the most independence. So we're aware of those. We're aware of the importance of having clarity about the distance learning options, how to access that, who's responsible for paying for it, and what kind of special ed services will come along with that. It's extremely important. And to give parents clarity about if they choose to enter that path, when can they possibly return to the school? So we'll have all those things fleshed out. Those are very important questions. And we recognize that distance learning and virtual learning needs to be something that's available for all students K-12. We recognize that the students in 7-12 are more familiar with our It's Learning platform, less so with K-6. So we're looking at other creative options to kind of provide good, consistent instruction with support. So more to come on that. But there will be some options for you.
Yes.
And no matter what you choose, coming to school, if we open, virtual learning, homeschool on your own, there's always a way to get special ed, always 100%. Okay, it just looks differently depending on what you choose.
Yes, and I just want to emphasize, and not completely repeated, but just coming from me, I want you all to know that there will be different pathways. The reason why we're not being explicit as to what they are is exactly as Vince stated. We need to refine the process because there are a lot of things available right now, and we don't want to make the situation worse by not making it coherent. Mm-hmm. And we also I have accountability pieces to the State Department as well. So that's also part of the reason why we need to be extremely thoughtful about providing these offers for individuals, because I'm accountable for each student. And I don't want to go into the weeds. I just want you all to know that we are clarifying the process and making sure that things are accessible and transparent. So if you choose to go that route, we want to be supportive. We don't want it to be a barrier. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot on the back end that I need to make sure it is working. So that's what we're working on as well. So thank you, Vince. You did a great job of.
No problem. I know this is important, so.
Yeah. So there have been a couple questions about, will there be another meeting? I think based on the number of messages and the number of folks on this call, I think we will want to schedule an additional meeting. As more information is shared, that will probably bring up additional questions that we'll need to address. And we have 17 minutes left this morning, and we have 53 messages. So I don't think we'll get to everything during this hour. Again, I would reiterate, feel free to contact me directly. But I do think based on the level of interest, which I greatly appreciate, we probably do need to look at an additional meeting at least. Okay. I'm not sure I understand a question here. Someone is asking, is the busing survey due today?
Ed, can you chime in on that?
The answer is yes. You've got the rest of the day, meaning you could do it tonight as well if you needed to. So yes.
Okay. And I'm wondering, I think the question may be if someone responds to the busing survey today, but then they're not comfortable with the district plans for safety and distancing, how would that impact their ability to potentially change their thoughts?
The director of transportation is a woman named Cindy Northern, and she wants to hear directly from people who have that inquiry. And I will give a phone number right now, and I will also type it in the chat box, but it's 446-1724. And again, that's Cindy, who is our relatively new director of bus transportation. So let me get that in the box.
Okay. Here's a really good question about health issues, specifically a student who has a significant health condition that requires ongoing support from the school nurse. And the parent is wondering how that might be handled.
Yeah, so real quickly on healthcare concerns. So really early on, we've been meeting, you may know this, but we've been meeting weekly, well, more than once a week, but we meet a huge group, about 25 district folks, have been meeting weekly to put together our reentry plans. That has included a lot of involvement from our school nurses who are off the summer, but they want to participate. So they've been involved in every meeting, as has our district physician. We're very mindful of the need to have more social distancing opportunities in the healthcare spaces. So we are in all of our buildings finding new spaces and new homes so that students, when they come down, will have more opportunities to safely social distance. We have a plan in place for dealing with kids who may have viral symptoms in a way to help them be safe and separated from students who are coming down for wellness checks and for regular kind of treatments and checks like this. And we're also considering maybe making some of our health services more mobile so that the students who are well but coming to the nurse for medications and those kind of things, we may be going to them. So we're working through all those plans. But what I can tell you for sure is that all the buildings the nurse's office will be in new locations with more space. There'll be more PPEs and masks, both for visiting students and for our nursing staff. And we are considering hiring an additional person perhaps to help supplement our nursing team so that we have more mobility and flexibility with delivering those services. An excellent question. And actually, Nurse Michelle Davis, this is an example, is on a county call in about 13 minutes to kind of continue to learn from other districts and our county Department of Health about how to implement healthcare practices. We're also going to reduce traffic a little bit in the healthcare spaces. So for snacks and for Band-Aids and those kind of things, we're going to try to provide more of those in the classroom so students won't have to travel to the nurse. So we are working through all those plans. And thanks for asking that question.
Okay. There is a question about SSD buses and health precautions. I have not yet had a meeting with the SSD Transportation Department about specific, cleaning and health guidelines on the SSD buses. I can tell you from, occasionally being on the buses, helping kids get on and off, they are generally by nature, due to the small number of students, they are generally distanced to begin with, but I cannot yet speak to cleaning procedures, sanitizing procedures, those kinds of things. But I'll be glad to look into that, and I would be prepared to share more information at an upcoming call. Here's a question about, will MRH be employing any additional trauma specialists to take a proactive approach to dealing with trauma issues that that kids have endured over the past months. You know, from an SSD standpoint, certainly we have our social worker who can be an available support for students and families. You know, I think at the district level, one aspect of the reopening planning is specific to social emotional learning and social emotional needs, including trauma. So the district is, you know, actively developing, you know, supports because we know without always knowing specifics, but we know that the closure, even this summer, not being a typical summer, may have had some deleterious effects on our kids' mental health and well-being. Okay. Here we go. Sorry, I was having trouble with the chat. Okay, I apologize. I lost my spot in the chat.
I think you're near the bottom, actually, Ben.
Okay. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, and I want to mention, if you're not following the chat, Mrs. Gifford has invited parents and is encouraging parents to consider joining the MRH Parent Advisory Council Facebook page. So that's a way that you as parents can be a support and a network to each other. For those of you who don't know, Mrs. Gifford was, still is, just the plans are, you know, changing. She was working on starting a parent advisory council. The first meeting had actually been scheduled for the Monday after spring break, but that, of course, could not happen. But you know, there is that initial group that is still, we're still wanting to get off the ground. Mrs. Gifford is the representative to the SSD, Parent Advisory Council. So I know she's already been in communication with many folks. I don't want to speak for her, but I know she's been willing to be, you know, a representative and a liaison in that regard.
Hey, Ben, there was a question from Frankie Landon that we didn't quite get. It was a question about students that leave the classroom to get special education services, go back to the gen ed class, and then just about cohorts and safety around that. Because I know that's one of the layers of protection that we're looking at for K-6 in particular, is keeping the cohorts together as one of the layers of protection. But for students that have typically traditionally left the room to get services, what's the plan for them in terms of safety?
Right. That will likely depend on the larger MRH plan that we're in, which is related to community spread of the virus. We would hope that with some of our larger spaces, we could still pull students for their groups. That being said, there have been conversations with myself, principals, about potentially changing the spaces in which students are seen, possibly providing services within classrooms to you know, maintain the integrity of those small group cohorts. You know, that's into an issue, of course, of you know, IEPs are written with services to either be provided in a general ed setting or a special ed setting. So we would have to be cognizant of being in compliance with IEPs, you know, while being compliant with IEPs, of course, in this given situation that we find ourselves, the health of our students and staff is of utmost importance. So we may need to, you know, think more creatively about how we provide those services. Of course, if a significant change like that were needed, case managers would be in touch with families about that, because of course you would have a right to know if service delivery was changing in any way, and would be included in that. Okay, Mr. Rich, the last comment in the chat currently is a link to the Facebook group. So if anyone wants to access that right through the chat in this conference call, you can do that. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions currently. I realize there may be
there will be
that are not in the chat.
Hey, Karen, can you share with the group real quickly? So the 20th is a day we're launching kind of the big picture of what we're doing school-wise. But is there something happening on August 3rd, or can you kind of talk with the group about that?
He has the answer to that, but he's
you know,
up for me. That's all right. I'm very happy to do so. So here is the sequence of events. The 20th, to reiterate, because I see in the chat you all are referring to that, and I just want you all to be clear. This is macro, big picture things that we're doing as a district. You know, what are we doing with masks? What are we doing with visitors? You know, general ideas. They're important, but it informs what happens to the building level or the meso level, and then that building level will inform the classrooms. The building level piece, where I mentioned before, you're concerned about what the classroom is going to look like, if your kid is still looping, things of that information, that's going to come out the week of August 3rd. So what I'm going to do, what happens with the feedback from families after the 20th will inform what's going to happen to what's going to happen on the building level on the 3rd. So it's important, and we don't know with our schedule, but we really should, and I agree with having another conversation so we can refine things. Because even though it's macro stuff that you're going to hear district level, it informs building information as well. So I would like, and maybe Ed, I think he was the keeper of the organization here, that we can find a date soon that it fits within the sequence of events. So we can hear from folks, okay, what additional questions do you have? What clarifications do you need? So you can see, like, our process is going to be a part of this information that's going on, that's going to go out on the 20th. How we arrived with developing our plan, and then what is the general framework of what we're going to do with our plan on the district level. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I did just remember in the remaining just couple minutes that we have, Mrs. Gifford had passed along some questions to me previously, and I think there are a couple maybe that we haven't hit on yet related, but one question was for students who are immunocompromised, can they still get services? The answer to that would be yes. We would obviously need to work with the school nurse, work with the IEP team to determine, you know, a safe way to provide services. So if that's a concern of yours, one of you who are listening right now, please reach out to me and we can work on that. There was a question about, can we have remote IEP meetings? Definitely. You know, it's likely that most IEP meetings, most if not all IEP meetings will be remote, just for everyone's social distancing safety. There had been a question about when dropping off students who elope, will parents walk the student in, or would a staff member greet the student and escort them in? And I think at this point we would be planning on a staff member, greeting the student either at the bus or at the car, et cetera, and escorting that student into the building so that they're safe. Let's see here. There have been questions about types of masks. That's a big topic for many folks. There is a possibility of clear masks. Someone was asking about that because students do benefit from seeing staff members' faces. SSD has already ordered some clear masks for our speech language pathologists who are specifically working on sound production and modeling sounds. So that's an option that will be available. There was a question about face shields. I'm not a medical professional. I know it's come up in our administrator meetings. There is some question about, all I will say is there's some question about face shields in terms of aerosolized particles and whether or not those are the safest options or not. Again, I think we'll have to be guided by medical science as it's available in terms of what types of facial coverings or shields would be worn if that's deemed appropriate. Some of you may be aware It's Learning does not have a text-to-speech or speech-to-text feature. It did not in the spring. So I am looking into if that's going to be added to It's Learning or if there's other technology that we might be able to overlay or combine with It's Learning that would make it more accessible for our students who have significant reading needs.
And there was a question, and Karen, you might want to weigh in. So one of the suggestions, which is a good one, is that should we have 2 more meetings, one after the July 20th announcement to pose some questions that might inform our building plans, and then maybe another one after August 3rd?
Yes,
Okay, I would agree. So maybe we should schedule a meeting the week of the 27th.
yes. And I had to step away from them. I hate to do this because it's 101 right now, but I'm curious, Frankie sent something out about trauma issues and being proactive about. Did you all talk about that?
Really, all I touched on was that part of the district level planning does include the social emotional component. I didn't go into more detail, but I shared that that is one aspect of MRH's overall reentry plan.
Yes, a specific plan. I want you all to know that we have thought through that and we're thinking through it. Let me say that. We're thinking through that, and we're going to be using a resource called Panorama. And it offers not only for us to survey students and staff around issues of social emotional issues, trauma, but also to give us resources, because there's a repository of lessons and information that we can embed in our lessons. So that is going to be the foundation of reentry, using this resource to move forward from there. So just like with everything else, with our nursing, with our learning plans, with transportation, we have pivoted and we're coming up with planning for reentry. We're also doing that for social emotional learning for students. So I just want to add that it is being very thought through.
Okay. So we are at 1:03. So we do need to wrap up our meeting today. It sounds like we're in agreement that we will be setting up additional meetings to follow the stages of MRH and building plans. Again, in the meantime, please feel free to reach out and we can stay in dialogue about specific questions that you may have between now and the time of the next meetings. So thank you so much for your questions and for your care and concern. We appreciate your support of the district and our mission. And until the next time, hope everyone stays well and healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate this showing up today. Thank you.